This is Blacklisted Radio. It's the 14th day of June 2014. In the dog days of summer. It's getting hot out there. The violence, the summer of rage, as it's been coined, seems to be alive and well in the Middle East. We'll get into it. My name's Doug Owen. I'm the senior editor of BlacklistedNews.com, news aggregator, social commentator, and I wear a lot of hats. You can check out my website dedicated to this show, BlacklistedRadio.com. You can follow us on Twitter at BLNRadio. That's the handle. And we always love to hear from you. Feedback is always appreciated. 512-222-3067 is the toll-free number to join us. War. Scandals. The VA. What is going on in the world around us? Well, we're going to talk about ISIS, this group that has seemingly come out of nowhere. The majority of Americans are just trying to wrap their mind around whether or not they support the Obama administration's handling of the Bergdahl scandal, and that's what it's become. It's become a scandal. I love the faux topics, the faux debate, and it is fake. It's really, I think, disingenuous when we talk about should or should we not leave a soldier behind when we look at all of the innocents and the victims that the U.S. has turned a blind eye to in the last 100 years. I mean, namely, I don't know, the National Fruit Company, 20,000 leftists and dissidents in Korea. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. The Bay of Pigs, the USS Liberty, Panama, the toppling of governments. I talk about Panama often because it was really the blueprint for what has happened in Iraq. It's what gave Dick Cheney, and Don Rumsfeld a lot of confidence in the ability to topple governments. It was really the beginning of the proverbial New World Order, the 1,000 points of light that George Bush saw. And so it's a good starting point for where we're going to go with the show today. But let's talk about ISIS. Interesting name. If you look into, of course, ISIS, the name refers to mythology, to the esoteric teachings, and all the way back to Babylon, but it's also the Islamic State in Iraq and Greater Syria terrorist group that is taking over Iraq right now. The response? Well, there's two responses. Don't do anything. Don't be fooled again. This is not America's fight. The, I guess, democratically elected, I hate to use that term because I don't think it's very accurate, but the government in Iraq is divided with sectarian divisions that are becoming more and more evident by the day, which has led really to, I think, the just dismantling of any legitimacy and representative government that may have happened, that may have occurred, that allegedly happened. So anyway, the Kurds. Huge demographic of people. Kurdistan is really it's like the idea of like a caliphate, having a homeland. The Israelis, what they have is basically what the Kurds want, which would be a national identity and a nation state for their people. I don't know why people want these things, but it just doesn't seem that advantageous to have a state dedicated to your perspective, I guess, or not perspective, but just your religion, your theocracy. It just rubs me kind of wrong. But anyway, Defense One has a great layout of who ISIS is and what it's about. It's predominantly Sunni. It's a jihadist group. It seeks to sow civil unrest in Iraq and the Levant, with the aim of establishing a caliphate, a single transnational Islamic state based on Sharia. Sharia law, we don't talk about it a lot here, but another one of these zany Abrahamic religions, the Muslims. I'm not a fan of any of them, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, or being a Muslim and the caliphate and trying to bring about some kind of version of Abrahamic law. Just not a big fan of any of those ideas. Ultimately, in my mind, religion and politics should be completely separated because religion's based on faith, and I would like our economies and our domestic and foreign policy to be based on pragmatism. Really, honestly. I would like a pragmatic approach, a less divinely driven approach to politics and to serving the people of the day. Of course, if you look at what's happening in Israel, you have the pressure, at least, to build the Jewish state. And the Jewish state basically says, or implies, that the rest of the people are not part of the state. You don't get to be a Christian in the Jewish state, and if you are, then you're going to be a second-class citizen. It's already inferred. It's not my conjecture or opinion. It's just what the goal is for some of the crazy zealots that are, Jewish supremacists in their government. That's what the Kurds would like to one day have. I mean, honestly, at least in some of their, and I don't want to bag or, put all of these people into one group or paint it with a broad brush because literally, I mean, there are millions, upwards of, according to this, 40 million Kurds. So anyway, back to the background here. The group emerged in the ashes of the U.S.-led invasion to Saddam Hussein as Al-Qaeda in Iraq, of course. It's important to note that there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. There were very limited amounts of poppy production and heroin production in Iraq. There were limited amounts of complete lawlessness and genocide. All of those things have dramatically increased post-U.S. invasion, post-circa 2003. So, after a U.S. counter-terrorism campaign and the Sunni efforts to maintain local security in what was known as the Tribal Awakening, the AQI violence diminished from its peak in 2006-2007, but since the withdrawal of U.S. forces in late 2011, there's the hook, the group has increased attacks on mainly Shiite targets in what it is seen as, an attempt to reignite conflict between Iraq's Sunni minority and Shiite-dominated government of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. And Maliki, aside from, I'm also not a fan, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, really, because he has to bow to U.S. and foreign interests at the same time, placating or, at least trying to make the people here, have a unity government or try to live in some kind of unity. And that in and of itself is very, very hard to do in a democracy because you have just this huge majority of people that, would like to kill all of the others because of their belief systems, because of thousands of years of bad blood and sectarian violence, which at this point is just silly. It's really, really silly. And I feel, this is my personal opinion, that not all hope is lost, but if you cannot unify people around the hate of the United States and NATO and the Western Empire, which should be pretty damn easy in a place like Iraq. I mean, there's just countless points and examples of why, A, radicalism is bad, B, why the United States and others in the central government that were put there by the U.S. are bad. If you can't unify people around that to put down their swords in the fight against one another, I don't know what you can unify around. And maybe that's what ultimately a lot of the policy wonks and academics that looked at the original invasion of the war in Iraq, 2003, hoped for. That there would be some kind of unification. That, even if you just hate the boogeyman, the bad guy, that can bring a country together. But, Middle Eastern politics, that's why I don't get into them. And that's why even Reagan, somebody I'm not a fan of either, or his policies, at least accurately said that, getting into this I paraphrase loosely as usual, but basically, you don't want to get into Middle Eastern politics. You can't win. And it's because it's religious based. It's dogma based. It's hate based at the end of the day. So, all of these people, the Kurdistan, or the Kurds, are trying to bring this realization of their own nation state to fruition through the ISI, which is an Al-Qaeda offshoot splinter cell that was so violent and so disgusting and heinous that they were banished. So, I mean, this is where we're at today. I mean, talk about unification. We've built a lot of terrorists. We haven't built a unity government. And then even the terrorists can't get along. So, I think that there's politics 101 and then there's parapolitics. And that's what you hope that, the hatred for a single identity. And you have that here. I mean, there's plenty of people that rally around hating the Democrats or hating progressives or hating the Republicans or the Tea Party. Oh, you'd think that they'd be able to get moving and realize who the real enemy is. I mean, anyway, I think people, if you haven't figured out where I'm going with it, then probably won't. The idea is that if this hasn't unified the Iraqi people, I don't know what will. But sowing violence and mistrust and redirecting anger is a very, very effective and powerful political tool that many of these groups are using. So anyway, because a lot of the people probably only support, at least in paying lip service or just turning a blind eye to groups like ISIS because of their hate for the United States and the Maliki government and the majority Shiite. I don't want to say it backwards. I usually get it. The majority Shiite domination over the minorities, the Sunnis. So that's always going to be a big deal. Now, interestingly enough, the origins are the insurgent group ISIS was launched by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. So we know of Mr. Zarqawi. He's of Arab and Jordanian descent, which is always questionable because we know what Jordan is. It's a U.S. proxy, U.S. and Israeli proxy, and where we have friendlies in the king of Qatar as well as of Jordan. So, let's see. The U.S.-led invasion of 2003 allowed, of course, his message to flourish. The sectarian tensions helped fuel what happened, especially after 2003. Zarqawi had commanded volunteers in Herat, Afghanistan, before fleeing to northern Iraq in 2001. He joined with Ansar al-Islam, Partisans of Islam, a militant Kurdish separatist movement, for whom he led the group's Arab contingent. Analysts said this group is not Al-Qaeda, but it was a precursor to AQI. So there's a lot of groups. It's actually pretty interesting because if you look at the end game, because a lot of what we see doesn't seem to have a lot of motivation, just anger and violence and wanting to overthrow the government. But you have a lot of outside players now. You have Iran, who is sending elite soldiers to fight ISIS. So this is the breakdown of sovereignty, and this is kind of reminiscent, well, it's not kind of, it's very reminiscent of what's happening in Syria. You have an outside invasion. You have forces and fighters from all over the world, and especially the Middle East, that are piling in to fight this proxy war. And Iran, just one of many. The Wall Street Journal, if you believe that, is reporting that Iran sent 2 battalions of Iranian Revolutionary Guards to help the Iraqi government in its battle against the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. ISIS. Not to put too fine a point on it, but this is hugely important, if not totally surprising, given Iran's intervention in Syria. Iran has the power to crush ISIS in open combat, but Iranian intervention could also make the conflict inside Iraq much worse. And there's nothing worse than a bunch of foreigners coming through and arming the local militia. I mean, if you think about that, it's highly not popular, and it's hard to maintain your ethics when you're accepting money from outside actors. I look at it, parallel that to the U.S. government and politicians that are dual citizens, working for some other group, or foreign corporations and countries using their lobbying dollars to sway political and legal changes in the U.S. system. I don't welcome it. Most people don't know about it, so I don't know how much of a factor it really becomes in the on-the-ground politics. How many people really talk about AIPAC or groups like AIPAC that are foreignly funded groups that look out for getting contracts and lots of dole-outs from the U.S. taxpayer. There's a lot of them. There's a lot more than just AIPAC, but they're very powerful, and they're just one of many examples of groups outside the U.S. that lobby for the U.S. to provide security and tax dollars, most importantly, to them. Anyway, so oil. This is what the war was about. Of course, if you believe George Bush and Tony Blair, the war in Iraq was about winning against radical fascism. Radical fascism. Militant fascism. That was the enemy. And if that was the enemy, then they've lost big time. Tony Blair has lost. George W. Bush and the American people and the Western world have lost. Now, if it's about oil, we may be losing as well. One of the maps here that we have in the show notes that we may publish. I'm going to start trying to publish and do a little bit more. It's just been so hectic. Just a personal note here. It's been so hectic trying to get the time and resources to do all of the production and post-production for the show. And we mentioned some of the light problems that we were having with the technology here, if you will, some of the equipment in the old studio. Nothing that's going to prevent us from doing the show. We don't extort listeners, but things that just make it a little harder. A little bit harder. Anyway, so this article came out, ISIS in-game oil, ? Because now a lot of people are taking note that this is a huge payday for the Kurds that have, I think, been playing both sides. If you look into the history of the Kurds, they've done a really good job at just being malleable with their allegiances. They will smartly, I guess you can give it to them for that, have decided to just strategically align with the winner, whoever's going to win. Oh, hey, America, sure, you're going to bomb Saddam Hussein? Yeah, we're with you. We're with you. Hey, Saudi Arabia, I mean, it doesn't matter. They know how to peg the winner, and they align with those that are currently in power, and have done a good job at that. Really, if you look at the history of the Kurds, and with their agenda, which seems to be kind of coming to fruition here. So anyway, privatized oil is probably the biggest worry of the Pentagon. If you look at most of the literature and white papers and the military doctrine itself, it's to protect our assets, U.S. assets abroad. What is that? That is oil. So and I'll put this map in the chat room. I think I can do that. Let's see. Maybe not. We'll figure it out. You can see that they have taken a lot of oil into their control. There's a crazy map of the land ISIS wanted to take over back in 2006 at the height of the Iraq War era power. So yeah, it looks like ISIS had a plan given to the contours of the map is to take over oil lands in eastern Iraq and western Syria. Now, this makes a lot of sense. And if you're going to get regional and local fighters and those that are willing to go against Assad, go against other militants and groups in these more non-controlled areas, especially in western Syria, eastern Iraq, where central government is lacking. You do have the provincial or provincial, I guess is how you'd say it, government. You do have people that are governing those areas, but it's not central government. So it's very, very loosely controlled, and it's more locally controlled. So that's a great attack point. So with all of this, I think one of the big things is the reaction. The underreaction would be to let the government completely dissolve and just watch Iraq turn into a complete failure. And that's a failure for the people too. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, we owe them something for destroying their country. I think we owe them something. Some people would say, no, we don't owe them anything. And for God's sakes, Doug, don't ask the government to do anything for them, because we see where that goes. We see where that ends up. We don't want to go there. And I agree, but to let the country completely dissolve. I mean, at some point, if you have an actual institution, no matter how corrupt, that is democratic, people will be able to use that institution and popular will to hopefully bring about something better. I know that's very idealistic, and some of you are just rolling your eyes. Yeah, okay, sure. Whatever, Doug. But it gives them an opportunity. And God knows there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of resources, and it could be a lot worse than it is today. It's going in that direction. But with all of that, I do think this is quite an overreaction. Okay, the videos of the 1,000 people captured by ISIS and their ability to control. I mean, number one, they don't have the military backing, but they do have the hearts and minds of a lot of Iraqis and people, separatists and Kurds in Syria. But the strategic bombing of targets is not going to ultimately produce the kind of results that anybody would want. The no boots on the ground policy, I think, is actually, if I was a war planner, which I am not, and I'm not a proponent of war either, but very non-strategic bombings, inaccurately killed civilians, people at weddings, that does not do much justice to the people, and it doesn't get rid of the bad guys either. If you send in actual teams to actual SEAL teams or other paramilitary groups to strategically assassinate terrorist groups in the cover of night, it would make more sense. Get rid of the bad guys, confirm that the bad guy is dead, the unfriendly, and then evacuate. Now, I guess we could say, or the argument against that would be, well, we can bomb them legally and it's no big deal. If we have a secret memo and we have some quack lawyer that believes that the U.S. can kill U.S. citizens without due process. They don't want to show that now, but they do have some kind of legal definition that makes that seem legal. But, I mean, from an actual military approach, it doesn't seem as easy. Or it seems like it would be a lot easier just to send in an assassination team. Or get Mossad to do it. Big bombings don't bode well with the people, and if anything, it destabilizes the whole region. I've talked about this often, but if you want people to believe in their fake proxy government that the U.S. installed and has engendered, then you're going to have to give them the at least allure or the veneer of being able to, provide protection from the evil empire. I mean, even if it's a fake show, you're going to have that if you want people to buy into it. And that's one of the things that just kind of blows me away, considering how much psychological operations go into the nightly news, how short-sighted and just bad, bad planning some of these, different operations take on or end up, just being done in such a amateurish way that you can't believe that this is really, the empire, if this is the empire's best attempt at making people buy into their BS, then, gives me a lot of hope. Gives me a lot of hope because people can see through all of this. One thing that this is all paving a way for is drones. Now, if you haven't heard, the U.S. has been secretly flying drones in Iraq. Not that it would probably shock anybody in the world that has any clue as to what's going on. I mean, if you've just been living your life as a goat herder in, nowhere, Mexico, maybe you're not aware, but everybody else should be, that the U.S. is operating drones just about everywhere. Just about everywhere. Well, the first commercial drone license to be used in Alaska to monitor the pipelines has been issued to BP. Now, this is just the beginning. This is the number one target for terrorists. Obviously, it's the pipelines. Pipelines are going to be the biggest focus for any terrorist organization, from ISIS to, PETA. Other terrorist organizations like Occupy Wall Street, according to government definitions and some of the latest and greatest that we'll bring you here in the second half of the show. So, with all of this violence, they're going to have to protect the pipelines, and what are they going to use? Drones. I think that's the number one focus in all of this, and what's happened with Kurdistan and why it's become, because every day the U.S. government turns a blind eye to hundreds of people being killed. It is just amazing how we've become numb, and the media has become numb to huge untold numbers of dead on a daily basis in Iraq. After a while, it's almost not, honestly, it's not newsworthy. It's not news. It's nothing new. It's just the same. 34 murdered on a weekend in Chicago. Is that news? It should be shocking. I don't know if it's news anymore, if it's just a really sad statistic, a really sad state of affairs. It's both. It should be news. Anyway, so this is going to be the new push for privatized commercial drones and providing lots of funding and, new CIA budgets for their new role in protecting pipelines. And interestingly enough, ISIS, this bad guy that's being funded by Saudi Arabia. Now, the Saudis, they come into all of this. They are one of the bad actors that has been a long time U.S. Friendly, and over the last few months, we've seen some division. The frost is off the pumpkin. The Saudis, their taps are running dry. I mean, this is the backstory. Their taps are running dry. They have an old, monolithic, ridiculous Sharia law government that treats women like crap and it's just archaic. It's an archaic government that is, a human rights abuser. I mean, just go down the list. I mean, they're right there in my book with North Korea and some other really effed up places you never want to go in your lifetime if you're listening to this podcast. They treat women like crap. And, we're worried about Russia. The Russians hate the gays. They hate the gays, Doug. So do the Saudi Arabians and the Qatari, but we don't give a crap about that either. So, spare me. Spare me all of the people that are being wrongly targeted. Same thing with Iran. I mean, you can't defend the theocracy, the zealotry that is their government today. Does that mean that it's okay to bomb them indiscriminately? No, it does not. But let's not make people like Bashar al-Assad out to be these heroes and champions of democracy. Let's not let, history and good common sense go out the window with all of this. So, anyway, Iraq is in chaos, and Islamic militants are overrunning the northwestern part of the country. And guess who's really freaking out? It's not the American people. It's not anything new that, as I mentioned, people are dying on a daily basis and being enslaved in Iraq. It's that they're going after the oil. And Saudi Arabia is funding and helping these groups. So it's turned into another proxy war where you have Saudi Arabia, Iran, Syria, the U.S. government, all fighting these small wars against different terrorist groups that are only mildly ideologically different. I mean, who do you back? They're all crazy. They're all crazy, and they all think that they're right and everybody else needs to die. And that's why we should not be giving bombs or weapons or money to any of these groups, because at the end of the day, you can't pick the winner, even if you want to. The Kurds have figured this out, and the U.S. government would do better by paying attention to that. Saudi Arabia is doing this out of complete desperation, the fact that without more oil, there will be no power base for them any longer. So, there you go. That's ISIS. New group. It's not a new group, but it's been there for a while, and now that it is threatening U.S. and British petroleum assets, Total, BP, all of these oil syndicates are very upset, and it's going to become a national issue. The question is, who gets bombed? That's targets in Syria, and it's being used as another way to say, or to promote the bombing of Syria. All right, have you been watching the World Cup? We talked about the lead up to the World Cup. We talked about Brazil, and we've briefly mentioned here on the podcast. If you've been reading BLN, if you're a regular reader, plenty of commentary on, the just shadiness and the spectacle, the gladiatorial sport that the World Cup has become. FIFA, one of these international organizations, tax-exempt groups, is definitely above the law. What's happened in Brazil happens every few years when they have the World Cup, and this year there's more attention to how egregious the inside or backside dirty business is done to get a World Cup, and how the taxpayers are ultimately screwed, and the people that oppose or speak out against the use of tax dollars to build stadiums and these huge monuments to debt, which they become, because the payoff and the initial money payout is never something that is ultimately going to benefit the people. They realize that they are not nearly as blindsided as the American people. They have a little forward vision, and they're like, hey, we're going to get screwed just like every other country. Hey, we've got Wikipedia. We can tell, okay, the people in Sochi are not going to be using that luge thing or the ice skating rink for that. It's not going to pay off using the ice skating rink. They're just not going to be able to charge enough children enough rubles there to make that worth the while. But Putin's buddies made a bunch of money. A lot of these huge construction tycoons and the like. They love this stuff because it's a boondoggle, it's a payday, and usually because everyone procrastinates and it's always a political challenge to get one of these things going. you at the end to get it completed so that everybody can get paid. No bid contracts. Usually as shady as it can be, but nothing short of that here at the World Cup. So the opening ceremony, if you didn't see this, they had an exoskeleton. That not one of the better looking ones either, but guy comes out in the exoskeleton. He looks crazy. He kicks the ball. Did not do the transhumanist society much good to see this. It wasn't that big of a deal. Anyway, BuzzFeed, which is good for these kind of headlines, maybe not so much for actual news, but, you know, this is something that my wife actually brought me. Here are the most WTF, what the fuck moments of the World Cup's opening ceremony. The disco ball globe, okay, it didn't work. It malfunctioned. J-Lo and Pitbull, their entrance was ridiculous. His pants, okay, Pitbull. I like Pitbull because he makes garbage music. He is bald and kind of looks like an idiot, and people love him. So it gives me hope. We had grass people. The grass people were there. Did you see them dancing? The flower people. It really looked like, you know, it was who had choreographed this was trying to, you know, make some sustainable development Agenda 21 entrance with, you know, all these tree people, but it just ended up being weird. There's a boy rowing a canoe with a seatbelt on, and he's being carried around by these blue rock people. He looks like he's an Indian. I mean, the thing was just weird. Some people saw it and thought, "Wow, this is cool," but it's all this esotericness. I don't know. I just thought it was lame. But the World Cup itself has turned out to be quite another. I don't know. It's kind of a joke. It's not nearly as watched. I don't know. They're saying what 20 to 32 million people will be watching the World Cup. It is the biggest sport in the world, so I don't know. At least the people in Brazil are catching on to the rest of the shenanigans, the scam that is the World Cup, and that's why they're being sprayed with water hoses, water cannons, and pepper spray, other chemical cocktails, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's worth checking out. It has a bunch of vines, the little 6-second videos of all the ridiculousness at the World Cup and trying to. I mean, because this is really a unification of world government, and I'm sure that if you go over to Vigilant Citizen, you should do that. I will after the show. We'll have a total breakdown on all of the esoteric and illuminist aspects of this show, but trying to incorporate globalism. It was weird because it had a lot of like Russian / North Korean, Asian cult of personality propaganda, like anime propaganda that you see that's really prevalent over there, old Soviet cartoon propaganda. And that was what the whole stage was. And so, I mean, I can't give proper analysis to what all of the meanings are, if there are meanings, because you have such a diverse group of artistes that get involved. But I thought it was a big fail. Uh-oh. My video driver is dying. I think I've melted the computer here. Anyway, nonetheless, there's a few other topics that okay. It might be coming back. Come on. Do. Alright, good. The takeaway from the World Cup is that it's a scam. Alright. Let's see. I've got a few other topics here that I do wanted to talk about. Just trying to go through everything here. Ah, yes. The Pentagon preparing for mass civil breakdown. These are the kind of headlines that are worthy of attention. We've talked about the DoD directive 3058 dot something or other. Let me see. We talked about this last week. the DoD directive, basically, for the institution of martial law, the engagement of the American people, the military, being able to to usurp your local police and sheriff's departments and take over your city, town, state, whatever it may be. Other people have taken notice, not just the alt media, not that the BBC Nightly News or PBS or your local NBC affiliate spent a lot of time talking about the DoD directive, but The Guardian has one here. Social science is being militarized to develop operational tools to target peaceful activists and protest movements. You got to go after the bad guys. It's all about Al-Qaeda. Oh, wait. The U.S. Department of Defense Research Program is funding universities to model the dynamics, risks, and tipping points for large-scale civil unrest across the world under the supervision of various U.S. military agencies. The multi-million-dollar program is designed to develop immediate and long-term warfighter-relevant insights for senior officials and decision-makers in the defense policy community and to inform policy implemented by combatant commands. What does that mean? Well, look at ISIS. Look at what's happening here in the homeland. So the mass civil breakdown, I think, is already occurring. You're going to have that as the economy continues to falter and because of bad policies. There are combatants, though, not nearly as many on the battlefield as there are in the economic world. The DoD is now putting some attention towards that because mass civil breakdown, one of the things that leads to that is money, economic collapses. So this is a real threat. There's two ways to look at this. One, it's propaganda, and oh man, they're coming after the right wing. They're coming after me. They're coming after everyone. They're waiting for this to all break apart so that they can institute martial law. Or you could say, well, it might not be a bad thing to look at, considering some of the really horrible things that are happening. I mean, we're seeing that in Ukraine, though the media has turned away from what's happening in the Ukraine to watch the ridiculous propaganda at the World Cup and some of the other blood sports. Anyway, the DoD research program is funding universities to model this dynamic. So this is more of the public-private partnership, pushing more people into the DoD. If you listen to them, they would tell you that there's a huge, huge problem getting new people, people that are able to be vetted and put into the DoD out there. And I would say it's probably because of drug testing and ethics. Not to mention, because the pay is good, it's got to be the fact that people just don't want to be part of the Defense Department. I don't know. Anyway, so there's a lot of these projects. Among the projects awarded for the period of 2014 to 2017, Cornell University-led study managed by the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, which aims to develop an empirical model, quote, of the dynamics of social movement, mobilization, and contagions. Who's the guy that's yelling on the bullhorn? Go after him because he's going to rile the people up. Whose Twitter handles garner enough attention? How are they using Twitter? How are they using social media? Now, number one, I think it's mostly common sense to see how mob rule works. But the DoD's worried about it, and that's going to be a focus, making sure that they can redirect mobs of people. If you go back to the U.S. Department of Defense's some of their original projects. I'm trying to think of the one. There's Project Megiddo, talked about often. There was another one that was Project Camelot back in, it was either the 50s or 60s. But Project Camelot was basically a way to infiltrate different movements and groups and create a steam valve for political dissent. Basically, doing a lot of rah, a lot of barking, but very little biting. And that was the whole point of it. So this is not a new idea or a new directive. This is just now media covering some of the things that the War Department is working on. And, of course, they want to look at contagion. And I like that because basically they see, with these terms, they see political and social movements as viruses, as bacteria that are spreading, that, similar to a plague. They see this as a huge problem. To paraphrase JFK, those who make peace or change impossible, political change impossible, peaceful political change impossible. I think that's it. They make it inevitable. Another paraphrased quote, something that I have taken away from that, is that that's true. If you can't stop a movement, you can't hold a good crowd down. You can try, but a good mob, a good crowd, it's hard to turn away from that. It's just like the media. I mean, you can put whoever you want in the media, but unless they're really popular and people want to watch it, it almost becomes irrelevant. So maintaining relevance is one of the big things that they have to do. They're looking at the Egyptian Revolution of 2011, which isn't much of a revolution, and that's because of the State Department. It's because of foreign influence, and quite literally about money, blood, and treasure. That is why you now have the U.S. giving money, aid, and support to the military coup. So, old guy and his party, he's gone. His party still in control, and the blood of many protesters and people that gave their lives for an opportunity, real or perceived, to have autonomy, to be able to control their own lives. So, that's a goodie. You should check it out. I mean, it just shows you how this is the future of education. It used to be about getting a business degree. I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, everybody wanted to get a business administration degree. They all wanted to have a BA in business. And that was, if you could get into business, there were so many corporations and things that were, places that needed to be managed. You were in. You could get a, six-figure salary pretty easily. And the dollar went a long way in the late 90s. A lot farther than it goes today, for sure. Just looking at the $3.50, soon to be maybe even $4 a gallon gas. You may be paying that wherever you are. For the people across the pond, you're probably just saying, well, welcome to our world. Welcome to our world of paying $15 a gallon for gas. Nonetheless, you can get a lot farther physically, financially with $1 than you can today. Believe you me, you don't get too far with the dollar. I mean, just to do this podcast, we pay $50 just for the hosting. It's pretty nominal sum of money, but $50, you used to be able to go out to dinner on that. Try to go to Chili's with a child and a wife and have an appetizer for $50. You have to do it between certain hours. Not that I'm suggesting you should, because it's all microwavable bag food, but you just can't get as far as you used to. All right, so that is really what is spurring the majority of unrest and I think disillusionment, and one of the hidden reasons why so many people today, so why we have an average in 2014 of every 4 days a school shooting. Some would like to point at the need for more gun regulation, more laws, more mental health laws, the breakdown of privacy between you and your doctor, sharing all of your personal information with the pharmaceutical industrial complex, insurance companies, and most importantly, the government, the ATF, as a solution to that. And of course, I don't support that. It makes no sense. The government's not good at getting people to do much. Look at Iraq. They're not good at keeping people happy, so are keeping the faux governments that they have instituted, that they have engendered, even keeping them afloat. The war on drugs has been the war on people in this country. The war on education has left so many people. What's the I think the illiteracy rate upwards of 35-40% in places like Detroit. I mean, these wars are anything that is a war being waged by the government is a loser these days. Usually have been, but more so now. Speaking of which, we should segue right into Russia. Now, Russia, there's a report out of the New York Times from the State Department that confirmed on yesterday, that the Russians had sent tanks and other heavy weapons to separatists in Ukraine. Doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me if they did. The column of 3 TS-64 tanks, several BM-21 Grad, multiple rocket launchers, and other vehicles crossed the border near the Ukrainian town of Shinzai, the State Department officials said. And there are some reports and images that went along with it. You can check those out. We've linked to them at blacklistednews.com to the New York Times piece. It doesn't shock me if you look at when the Soviet breakdown happened. So much of the heavy military equipment and weaponry just went gone. The Lord of War movie that was based in some reality, based on a true story about weapons dealers, highlighted the amount of heavy weaponry that was exported out of Russia in the late 80s, early 90s, and some of you out there listening to this podcast might have been a benefactor, being able to buy a SKS or other Russian originating rifles for next to $50. I think my buddy's dad was telling me that he bought a pallet rather, of SKS rifles, which is very similar to the AK-47, same caliber and round used in both. And he paid $50 a piece. He bought this pallet of them for, I think, right under $1,000. And just a few years ago, just to buy one AR-15, a Bushmaster or something that's not really that great of a gun. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Bushmasters, not to talk about them, in a bad light. I mean, I'm pretty indifferent, but not one of the more expensive ones. It's an inexpensive gun. You're spending upwards of $1,200. So when still today, Russian ammunition for those calibers is very popular, and probably some of these export bans are really putting a dent in the availability of people to get ammunition in this country. So, point being, the Russians have a lot of ammunition, and they have been arming people around the world, from Kalashnikovs on, and they only are second to the United States government and all of our subsidiaries and the U.S. military-industrial complex, but Russia's right there. Nonetheless, this is, I think, going to be used, whether it's true or not, as a way to demonize and to blame the bloodshed, the civil war that is unfolding in eastern Ukraine. No one at the State Department wants to talk about what's happening in Ukraine because we have our hands all over it. We are deeply involved. CIA and FBI is on the ground. The liaisons are working with these groups and the Ukrainian military to strafe and to kill separatists, possibly Russians. But the whole situation has completely devolved, and it is a highlight as to why the U.S. should not intervene. So this is a big black eye for U.S. foreign policy. This is something that I don't ultimately believe that the U.S. was prepared for. I really think that they thought that the Russians were just going to allow all of this to happen, that Putin would not react because of, the Olympics, because of Sochi, because of what had happened in South Ossetia and Georgia just back a few years ago in 2008. And so this is a huge problem. They were also using the Ukraine as a way to push weapons into Syria. So the U.S., quite a precarious situation today with Iraq, Syria, now the Ukraine, just devolving into separatism, and to more case in points why the U.S. and our policies are failing. Libya is just out of control. Just the other day, they had their international airport taken over. I think they've reclaimed the Libyan government, whoever they are, have reclaimed the airport. But I mean, it's a regular daily problem maintaining any kind of control. And all of these governments, I mean, this is how ridiculous it has become. All of these governments are solely propped up by the United States government, U.S. dollars, taxpayer dollars, and some of our other institutions like the IMF in Europe. But any of these, I mean, without U.S. support, Iraq would just turn into the biggest clusterfuck you can imagine. Ukraine as well, because of what we have done. So I think that it's a great opportunity to gut check the U.S. and hopefully get people, the globalists, out of the business of regime change. But these are the same people that brought you 9/11, the PNAC crew, the Kagans, the Wolfowitzes, the Don Rumsfelds, the Cheney Doctrine. This is the exact same skull and bones Yale ideologies and plans that Kerry and Bush and the rest of this crew of ideologues have brought us. This is the Bill Kristol solution. This is the Trotskyites that have taken over U.S. foreign policy, not to mention the Israeli regime. This is what happens when you have the U.S. Fighting for external interests and not for the people, or for the people of this country, or the respective countries that we invade. This is the ridiculous short-sightedness of our policy, and I can only say that hopefully this becomes a changing event, that this becomes a catalyst for what should have happened 11 years ago. And that is for the United States to literally, legitimately let people determine their own way forward. It's not going to be easy. Sometimes people in these countries, like Iraq, they want a bunch of crazy zealots running the world, and it's hard to let them. It really is. It's really hard to say, well, I know you guys want the wrong thing. It's like your mom letting you make a bad decision. I know you guys don't really want, religious extremism and the caliphate and Sharia law, but, they're doing a good job here with political correctness and other cultural Marxist crap that is blinding a lot of Americans. So it continues. It'll continue next Saturday if all is able and we are able to do so. We will, as per usual. We'll probably make it. I want to thank all of you for being part of the show today. You can go to blacklistedradio.com or blacklistednews.com if you find the commentary compelling. Make a small contribution, or just let other people know about the show. We'll have it up on YouTube later on today. And I'll be back next Wednesday for Doomcast number 46, and next Saturday for another live edition of Blacklisted News Radio. Have a great weekend. Take care.